All right. I think let's officially kick off this event. I'm already seeing hellos in the chat. Really lovely to have you all with us today. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Sonia Anderson, and I lead INEE's work on data and evidence. And I'm here with an amazing variety of esteemed panelists, speakers, and of course, INEE Secretariat supporting this event. Just a couple kind of Zoom housekeeping pieces before we do get started. You have been muted because this is a large form webinar, but we really encourage you to interact in the chat. Feel free to introduce yourself, share any reflections on the panels being shared. And of course, if you do have specific questions, the Q&A function is available. We won't have significant time for a formal Q&A during the event, but what we will do is collect all of the questions that you note in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will combine responses either from our panelists or from the INEE Secretariat, and then make that information available on the INEE website on our events page after this event. So we do encourage you to ask questions. We would love to hear your reflections and definitely introduce yourselves. The other kind of Zoom housekeeping piece is that we do have interpretation available today in Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Arabic. If you need any support accessing that, please feel free to request support in the chat, but hopefully that is an appreciated function for this event. So with that, I would love to just go over the agenda, which I think perfect is the next slide. We're really excited in this event today to reflect on and celebrate INEE's legacy over the past 25 years as our 25th anniversary, while also acknowledging areas of growth and kind of most importantly, commitments to doing things differently moving forward. So over the next hour and a half, we're going to have some opening remarks and a short anniversary video. We'll have a panel, a storytelling panel that engages some of our speakers in the question of what does INEE mean to you? We will then present INEE's new operating model, which we're really excited to share with all of you. And that will be followed by a second panel from speakers reflecting on this new operating model. And we'll close with closing remarks. So with that, I will hand over to Dr. Faiza Hassan, INEE's director.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining us from across regions, time zones, and languages. 25 years ago, INEE began with 4 incredible practitioners gathered together in a room in Dakar, Senegal. And today, we're celebrating a quarter of a century of collective action, shared purpose, and a community that has grown far beyond what those original 4 founders could have imagined. INEE is built by its members, and today we honor our collective impact. And to help us open this milestone moment, it's my pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Amrita Paul, the Director for Education at Global Affairs Canada. Canada has been a strong partner to the EIE community and a very strong ally of INEE's mission. Amrita, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Faiza, and to all of you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. A very happy birthday to all of you in INEE. It's a real pleasure to be here today and a great, great honor to welcome you as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of INEE. It's an extraordinary milestone for a network that has fundamentally shaped education in emergencies as a field. So over the last 25 years, or a quarter of a century, INEE has really transformed what was once overlooked as an issue into a coordinated, evidence-driven movement grounded in the right to safe, quality, and relevant education for all children affected by crisis. Canada is very proud to stand with INEE. From establishing the INEE minimum standards to co-publishing the Journal on Education in Emergencies, to developing technical guidance on teachers, gender, inclusion, and more, INEE has shown what becomes possible when humanitarian actors, governments, educators, research, and crisis-affected communities align around shared principles. INEE has demonstrated that education is not only life-saving, it is a foundation for dignity, protection, and resilience. As we mark this anniversary, we're also meeting at a very pivotal moment. The global landscape is shifting rapidly. Rising conflicts, climate-related shocks, shrinking aid budgets, and calls for greater accountability and locally led action. The pressures on education systems and on the communities and practitioners who support them are unlike anything we've seen in the past decades. These realities compel us to think differently about global solidarity. Solidarity today must mean more than shared concern. It must mean shared responsibility, working across the humanitarian development peace nexus, aligning around evidence, reducing fragmentation, and ensuring that communities and local actors are empowered as drivers of solutions. It also means being honest about the hard choices ahead, how we prioritize resources, how we coordinate more effectively, and how we maintain education as a central pillar of protection and long-term recovery. Through all of this, INEE remains a steady and essential anchor. For 25 years, it has helped the sector navigate change and complexity, and it will continue to guide us as we confront new challenges and reimagine what effective, coherent, and equitable education reflections from global, regional, and country levels on how this network has shaped your work and how together we can strengthen our collective impact for the next 25 years. Your stories and insights will help frame the path forward. And in the same way you've done this for 25 years, I look forward to the next 25 years, and on we go. So thank you very much to INEE and to all of you for your success. Over to you, Faisa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amrita, for these reflections and for your continued long-standing leadership in this space. As we mark this anniversary, it is important to remember that for us, this is not just a celebration of where we've come from. It's also an opportunity to reflect on how the sector has evolved and what it will take to shape the next 25 years. And I think for me, that reflection begins with why I entered this sector to begin with. I started my career a little bit by accident in this sector. In 2012, Somalia had achieved a milestone with the official end of the civil war and the establishment of a new federal government. And for many of us in the diaspora, that was a spark of hope. Like so many others, I bought a one-way ticket, packed up my bags, and went home, driven by the simple belief that rebuilding had to start somewhere, and I wanted to be part of it. And so soon after I arrived in Mogadishu, I found myself volunteering at the newly reestablished Ministry of Education. And so that's how I found myself working on Somalia's first major effort to revive public education after the civil war. And those early days were full of energy, uncertainty, and rebuilding after a civil war is never easy. And at the time, the Ministry of Education wanted to roll out a national accelerated learning program so that overage children could have a second chance at basic education. We wanted to roll out a program that was nationally owned, not another temporary, parallel, fragmented project. And that's for me how I first came across INEE. At the time, through a partnership with INEE's Accelerated Working Group, we gained access to a wealth of technical resources and, more importantly, connections. We connected with colleagues in the Ministry of Education Uganda who were members of INEE. We connected with colleagues in Ministry of Education Nigeria who had already developed national models. And so based on their experiences, that helped us adapt and build Somalia's approach. And so what would have taken us years to achieve, we achieved in the fraction of a time because of the power of a network, because of the power of shared learning and collective problem solving. And so to me, that is what INEE represented then, and that is what it continues to represent today. a space where knowledge and resources flows in all directions, shared across peers, across organizations, across countries, across regions. And at the time in Mogadishu, as we were trying to rebuild a national system, I felt supported by a network of peers, not external experts flown in to build our capacity, but genuine equal peers walking the same road, solving the same problems in different locations. And today, more than a decade later, it's humbling to have joined the very same network that I turned to as a practitioner in Mogadishu. And I think INEE is more than a network. It's a community of practice. It's a connector. It's an enabler. And anyone who has worked in the education in emergencies field has a story with INEE. And so, for 25 years, INEE, as Amrita has said, has been a reference point for education in emergencies, providing frameworks, guidelines, technical resources, and shared spaces that have helped the sector align around common principles and collective action. And 25 years ago, I think when INEE was born, the idea of education in emergencies was still a radical idea. And the story of INEE really mirrors the evolution of this sector. It is improvised, it's collective, it's built by thousands of people and shaped by classroom realities as much as global frameworks. But as Amarita has said, the world is changing and crises are more complex and more widespread. And our systems are not really fit for purpose anymore. And that's why we at INEE this year, we started by listening to our members, to those holding education systems together in the hardest of contexts, through initiatives like the Beyond Aid, What's Next for EIE, and the Centering Equity Reference Group. We asked our members what they needed from INEE today. And the message we got was really clear. Members wanted INEE to be bolder, not just to mirror the sector, but to actively try to change it. They wanted us to confront power imbalances. They wanted us to embrace the role of a constructive disruptor, one that doesn't just convene the sector, but actively challenges it to do better. And we've heard loud and clear across the membership, a shared frustration with the status quo, with a system that often constrains the very people it's meant to support. And as one member in Colombia said, I'm tired of the same line from global actors. Localization is seen as a solution when in reality, what they mean is local actors are cheaper and can also do more, can take on more risk. And yet, amid this fatigue with the system, there is also an incredible amount of effort on the ground. Members are innovating with what they have, partnering with faith-based organizations, launching income-generating activities to sustain schools, advocating for EIE to be integrated into national plans, volunteers stepping in as teachers in the absence of others. And these are just a few examples of even in the middle of this difficult moment, life continues and people continue to try to move on with life and do the best that they can. And so, as INEE turns 25, we are moving towards a locally anchored and globally connected network. To put that simply, we are intentionally shifting our own center of gravity from globally driven network structures to locally led and globally backed solutions. And so, as we mark this 25th anniversary, we're not just celebrating the past, we're also turning the page to the next chapter. We're holding ourselves accountable to evolve, to listen, to work differently, and to redefine what it means to be a network in today's world. We're redefining how we work. We're decentralizing the network. We're anchoring the network much more strongly in ministries of education, in teacher unions, civil society, and other regional and national networks. We're strengthening our role as a knowledge curator and broker, and we're diversifying our membership base. And so while we're excited about this direction, we recognize that change is never easy, but we're committed to doing this. We're committed to show that reform does not need permission. It needs persistence, and that we can be both principled and practical. And so with all of you INEE members with us here today, we're excited to be doing this in partnership with you. I will stop there. I think I've gone well over my time. Sonia, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Faiza. Um, Already fantastic to just hear the appreciation and excitement for a next chapter of INEE. And so with that, we're going to continue. We'll see a short video now from a few of our INEE country focal points, sharing their experiences as INEE members and their hopes for INEE's future. And these are just a few of our wonderful country focal points. So if you're interested in hearing more from them, please check out the link, which we will be sharing shortly in the chat.
I came to know about INEE when I was working as a researcher in Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh. First, I came to know about INEE Journal, but what really drew my attention was the vast network of education and emergency workers in one place. I think the best thing about INEE is its web of actors around the world, particularly from the crisis-affected areas, and INEE provides the perfect platform, especially the community of practice group. In the upcoming years, I'd like to see my country adopt the INEE minimum standard in education policies, and I really look forward to it. Thank you.
INE has done a lot to contribute to the progress of education in emergencies in Nigeria and all around the world. If you're not yet a member, I do encourage you to join. Over the next 25 years, it is my hope to see INE continue to listen to local voices so that we can shape the future of education in emergencies in Nigeria and everywhere around the world.
I first connected with INEE in 2018 when I started my professional journey. Over the years, INEE has remained a constant companion, a space for learning, collaboration, and impact. I think INEE's greatest strength is linking local realities with global knowledge, and I hope it continues to grow more impactful and transformative in the next 25 years.
Yo conocí de la INE a partir del 2010, cuando realizaba talleres con esos estándares mínimos en donde apoyábamos a escuelas a reconocer que la educación puede salvar vidas y prevenir muchos riesgos asociados en distintos contextos. La educación en emergencia tiene todavía muchos retos y desafíos en donde una posibilidad activa como lo es la INE puede generar la posibilidad de que sigamos conectados, sigamos articulados y sigamos trabajando en conjunto. Es importante identificar las brechas de investigación, de acciones y trabajar de manera colaborativa para poder desarrollar procesos que vayan desde lo local y puedan tener incidencia hacia las decisiones de política pública.
Why should people join this network? One is, this is where resources about education emergency are found and valuable information when it comes to intervention around education emergency will be, are found. So I'm inviting people to join this network. In the next 25 years, I want to see this network grows, but again, I want to see the network works with the national stakeholders, organizations, and other partners to reach children who are in need.
INEE provides an invaluable platform that connects practitioners, promotes quality and accountability, and ensure education remains a lifeline in times of crisis. As INEE turns 25, I hope to see the network continue to amplify the local voices and advance inclusive, resilient education systems globally. Happy 25th anniversary, INEE.
Thank you. And Lauren has just shared a link if you're interested in seeing more videos and connecting with our wonderful country focal points. So we're going to continue in this vein, kind of reflecting on INEE around a common question to 5 diverse voices from different regions. So the question is, what does INEE mean to you, and how has INEE shaped your work? And we'll hear from each of them in turn. So Johanna, I think I'll turn to you first. Johanna Beatriz Ortiz Wilches is the Director of Risk Management in the Ministry of Education, Culture and Sports of Ecuador. And Johanna, if you can just share in some short words what INEE means to you and how it has shaped your work. Thank you.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. For me, it's an honor to have the opportunity to share this presentation with you. I really appreciate your time and attention. With that, my presentation focuses on the significance of the INEE for the Ministry of Education, Sports, and Culture of Ecuador. These standards provide a coherent, technically sound structure aligned with international benchmarks, which has supported the development of strategies, tools, and policies within this ministry. These standards has contributed to the consolidation of the national educational risk management system and has strengthened international coordination at the national and territorial levels as well. Also, the standards have been the key to advancing guidelines that we have here in this ministry to ensure safe, protected, and inclusive educational spaces. The standards have the development of the contextualized pedagogical materials and criteria, such as the pedagogical guidelines for emergency situations. Here we have some pictures of our schools here in Ecuador. The INEE has influenced the strengthening of the teacher capacities for prevention, preparedness, and response in any kind of emergency. And finally, the standards have served as a reference for aligning institutional planning, improving regulatory instruments, and advancing public policies that guarantee educational continuity in any context. To conclude, I would like to mention that the next steps involve integrating a roadmap to work together, ensuring that educational remains a safe, protected, and high-quality space in any context. And that was my presentation. Once again, thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Johanna. It's wonderful to see the minimum standards in action. Thank you for sharing. Next, I'm going to turn to Wahid Jubran, who works with the Sub-Education Cluster in the West Bank and is INEE's country focal point in Palestine. So Wahid, over to you to reflect on what does INEE mean to you and how has it shaped your work?
I think it's a strange question to be asked to someone who keeps living and working and struggling in an environment that is full of crises. Whenever you are living in such a crisis context, environment, you need someone to support. You need a network, you need experienced people, you need resources, you need tools, you need something to use to deal with such emergency, which is protracted emergency in Palestine, in both Gaza and West Bank. So this is what it means to me, INEE. It means that it is a network, global community network, wealth of resources, tools, shared principles, roadmaps, guides, notes, that anyone who's working in education in emergency needs such resources, such experience, and this wealth of resources and experiences. So it means a lot, actually. And actually, I'm connected to INEE since its early beginnings. So maybe I'm also celebrating my connection with INEE. It's not just the 25th anniversary of INEE. So I think it's also the 25th of my connection with INEE. So it's in the early. And I'm still connected and happy to be connected. And happy to be part and active member as focal point of INEE in Palestine. And also because in my work as West Bank Education Cluster Coordinator, where is the focus on education emergency, so my INEE, it's something, it's magic for me. Something, it's a really a valuable asset that always I need to resort to read, to be engaged. And this is what, I'll give you an example. What does it mean, not just to me as Wahid, but also as Palestine? In Gaza, during the war, after October 23, no education in Gaza, so it was halted, it was stopped, it was no education at all. And in West Bank, there is a lot of disruptions in education. Here, INEE jumped in to help through the Accelerated Education Working Group. They developed pathways for learning, to resume learning in Gaza and to ensure continuity of learning in West Bank. And actually, I'm happy that I was part of developing such a brief, that it helped a lot. And actually, I presented INEE and presented it to the Ministry of Education to try to persuade them it is something that part of INEE support to Palestine and to the Ministry of Education and to all the stakeholders of education stakeholders in Palestine. Now I am working or leading an effort to ensure that we can get benefit of the INEE minimum standards 2024. I know that it is global standards. It is something for everyone, for every context. But the challenge when it comes to context, which is not, to me, you want to make sure that it is applicable in that context. And I'm leading an effort to have a sort of contextualization of the INEE minimum standards 2024. And it went through a participatory approach with different people, different stakeholders, and soon it will see the light. So this is another station. What means how does INEE? What does it mean to me, and how do I value INEE? So the learning pathways, the contextualization, and the minimum standards of 2024. And actually, I'm happy and I'm proud, not just happy, that I was part of developing these minimum standards, reviewing the standards, reviewing the Arabic translation, and to ensuring that the right terminology are used in the right places. So this is INEE. INEE, it is something that it is valuable, it is a network, and now I am happy that it is updated INEE. It is keep following up what are the developments on the ground, and this is why we have now the new version of INEE 2024, because a lot of updates, a lot of changes, a lot of challenges. And the other thing that we are all witnessing the challenge of cutting aids. And actually, I was engaged in an event when we developed, or we had a sort of meetup and event in Palestine, that how to deal with the challenge of shrinking budgets. And INEE, I think it's leading in this domain, that trying to empower the local people and trying to empower the ministries of education through supporting these, to look for ways, for venues, to start thinking how to locally support education, not to keep clinging to or hanging on the external aid. I'll stop here. I'm not sure if I have passed my time but I stop here. So it means a lot. I'm very proud that I'm a member of INEE. And actually, I produce an idea how also to enhance INEE in the region. And actually, it was something before starting thinking about the operating model, or before seeing the operating model. So I was initiating such thing, how to enhance it regionally, INEE in our region. Thanks a lot, Sonia, and thanks for everyone for listening to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Wahid. Thank you for being with us here today, for your work over all of these many years with INEE, as you noted from the beginning, and continued support and leadership in such a protracted crisis. And I hope that what you proposed is aligned or is supported by INEE's new operating model. I think the entire point of it is to be much more responsive to your needs. So I do hope it's aligned, and if not, we will do our best to align. So thank you so much. With that, I will turn to Dr. Carmen America Vigne, who is a full professor at Andrés Bello Catholic University in Caracas and member of the education cluster in Venezuela. Over to you.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you for my colleagues who share this important testimony of the reality in Ecuador and in Palestine. Thank you for this. Well, I live in Caracas, Venezuela. I am Venezuelan. Since 2015, life has become complicated in my country. Without having experienced a civil war, we have seen a deterioration in living conditions, the collapse of health services, food, safe water, sanitation, electricity, and the internet, a collapse in wages and economic income, and a deterioration in livelihood and education, among the most difficult consequences of the complex and protracted humanitarian crisis we have experienced since then. We have lived through periods of greater impact with tremendous consequence. The Interagency Coordination Platform for Refugees and Migrants from Venezuela estimates that 6,874,261 Venezuelans are in situation of mobility as migrants and refugees. In the last few years of this complex and protracted crisis, we have experienced the risk of the crisis become invisible due to fatigue and financial difficulties. I know that the latter is not unique to Venezuela. That is in other regions that the global impact of funding cuts has been devastating of the life of millions of people who has been put at greater risk by this fatigue from humanitarian crisis and the lack of funds to address them. However, I wanted to begin my speech here by pointing out that those of us speaking today, we are people affected by our living environment. Yes, but we are also people with the capacity for agency and response. INEE gave me more agency to cope with the challenge of education in emergency situation and protracted crisis. And from here, I want to tell you how I knew about INEE and why it helped me from the beginning. In mid-2019, I discovered the INEE website, and it helped me enormously to begin to learn about the network collection and research library. That was when the first big change came in my perception of what I could do about the deterioration of education in Venezuela. I discovered the minimum standard for education and was fortunate enough to meet Vente Sandal Asen, who trained me in the midst of the 2020 pandemic as a facilitator of the minimum standard. I will always remember her telling us that the minimum standards are not only available for emergency response, but also for use in preparedness and recovery context. From what I understood, the standard can also be useful for protracted crisis and for triple nexus response, in which humanitarian development and peace-building action complement each other. I realized this around 2020, 2021. Of course, of that time, I didn't know that this possibility of education in emergency response in coordination with development cooperation mechanisms was called the triple nexus, and that it was directly related to the protracted crises that are currently present in my country and in many countries. I have facilitated several training sessions on the use of the INEE minimum standard for education. This has been an extraordinary opportunity to connect with many people and colleagues, both in Venezuela and elsewhere. In this regard, the INEE and those who are part of its secretariat such as Laura Tiana, Ariel Solari, and at the time, Claudio Osorio, supported me and continued to do so in creating space for training, meeting, and advocacy. Thanks to them, I was able to be part of the update to the minimum standard in 2024 and the team of colleagues who supported the translation into Spanish. Thanks to INEE, I served at its focal point in Venezuela for 3 years. This has also been a very important experience in terms of building meaningful relationship and training with the education cluster in Venezuela. In addition, as a focal point, I meet other focal points who has very important to me. For example, Martín Villarruel in Bolivia and Pedro Tena in Mexico. I hope to meet you in person very soon. Since 2019 and from 2022 and to October 2024, I organized 7 meetings in Venezuela. There is also met valuable colleagues and established a relationship between INEE and university in the country. I also see how INEE has transformed my approach to work and provide me greater agency to achieve change and transformation. In this sense, I firmly believe in the recovery of my country through alliance between institution, civil society, and the education state. One of these alliances that is significant for development is with university. I have always advocated for them, and with INEE, I have been able to strengthen this relationship, which are fundamental to me. Finally, many thanks to the network and to those of us who are part of it. One regards to all of you and many more, and for us, for many more 25 years and beyond for INEE. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carmen America. You brought in such wonderful points, I think, relating to agency, the minimum standards, not only being a response mechanism, but enabling preparedness and planning. And I think really the human element, right? INEE is a large network. We're over 25,000 members now, but so much is really just based on the individual human interactions. So thank you for your reflections. Just a couple more folks to go to. So now I will turn to Dr. Chima Agbuju, who is the head of the Curriculum Development Center in the Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council. Dr. Chima, over to you.
Thank you, Sonia, for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here and to further link up with members of the INEE family. To us, INEE entails a standard bearer in terms of providing quality and inclusive education for all, particularly the children and youth who are affected by crisis. As you may know, Nigeria has witnessed and is still witnessing a high level of crisis across the regions. In the course of my work, came in contact with INEE through the Accelerated Education Working Group, and we're able to begin to think of how we can provide a strong and strategic solution to the challenge of out-of-school children and youth in the country, because as many of you would know, Nigeria is known to be one of the countries with a very high rate of out-of-school children and youth. And in the course of that, we were thinking of providing educational program that will serve the needs of these children. We are able to come up with accelerated education program, which is contextualized to our needs. So in the course of that, because before then, as a nation, we had development partners, we had organizations, we have community-based groups who were providing education, but there was no standard, there was no framework, there was no curriculum. So everybody did what they felt like necessary. And then when you compare to the quality, there was that shortcoming in terms of quality of education. So there was a need to provide a standard, provide a framework that will ensure that these children receive quality education that will help them transition into formal school program, in the course of time. So we came up with a strategic program, which we refer to as the Accelerated Basic Education Program. And we leverage on the INEE tools, the AEWG tools, the global tools and guidance, particularly the 10 principles. We leverage on that to create our own curriculum, create our own standard, and we're also able to develop our own national implementation guideline. And today, I would say that that program is taking a very bigger shape, being adopted across the regions and states of the country. And in fact, it's a program that was given approval by the National Council on Education, which is the highest policy-making body in the Nigerian education sector. Recently, the Minister of Education also re-emphasized the fact that the accelerated basic education program is the only educational program that we need to implement across the country so that all learners can have quality equivalent basic education, that will help them to transition into formal school program. So that is one way that INEE has shaped our work here at NERDC. And again, going further, we're also able to leverage on the tools that INEE through AWG had developed, particularly the teacher training pack, which we contextualize. And today we have trained over 2,000 teachers using that pack, and they are doing very well. That is being on the low side across the country, across the regions of the country. And the impact has been very huge. Wherever we go, we hear and we get the result that this thing is impacting on what the teachers are doing in the classroom. And for us, again, we're part of the team that participated in the workshop in Dakar, Senegal, where we also built our capacity, to strengthen what we are doing. And through the working relationship with INEE, we also had a very national research work, which is about the political economy analysis to understand the issues around out-of-school children and youth in the country. And the research has helped a lot in shaping our program, shaping what we do across the country. And the impact, I would say, is very huge and is still increasing by the number of students who are benefiting from the program. And apart from the fact that INEE has given us a lot, we also have benefit. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yeah. So apart from the fact that we've learned from INEE, INEE is also learning from us because we're working with INEE to also provide support to other countries. We've given support to places like Somalia. We've given support we're currently doing that with Rwanda. We are doing so with Sierra Leone. And these are countries that are also leveraging on what we've done in terms of the curriculum and the national implementation guideline. It's something that we are proud of because working with INEE has not only impacted on our capacity, it has also helped us to share our experience with other stakeholders across other regions of the world. And that is something we'll celebrate and we'll continue to celebrate. But like we used to say that it is not over yet because there is still more that we want to do with INEE. As a national institution, we still want to collaborate. We still want to work together so that we can ensure that children are supported and provided quality education irrespective of the crisis that they are facing across the regions of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for highlighting the critical aspect of INEE learning from you, from all of its members. I mean, we are all INEE, but collectively, I think that's the most important thing that we really do learn from our members. So thank you, Chima. So last but not least, I'll hand to De Werkelauten, who is the Senior Program Manager at Porticus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. So I think I just wanted to start with congratulations to INEE, not only to the Secretariat, but to all of us, because as Sonia just said, I mean, we are all INEE. Porticus has engaged with INEE since 2017 and is very honored to sit on the steering group of the network, participate in the psychosocial support and social emotional learning, so the PSS SEL working group, and support the overall work of the network. So for me, INEE really equals education in emergencies in all its diversity. And I want to highlight three important roles that I believe INEE plays, and also how this has shaped my work, that of my colleagues, and also of partners, namely INEE's convening power, the thought leadership, and also INEE as a standard setter and as a knowledge broker. So let me just start with the convening power. I think INEE members, we are the EIE ecosystem in all its diversity, and there's strength in this diversity. We have national organizations, INGOs, researchers, government staff, and funders, and INEE really brings us around the table on an equal footing, recognizing that we all bring equally important and complementary resources, such as reach, expertise, and funding. And INEE helps ensure that this EIE ecosystem is really grounded in the lived reality of children and teachers and really helps to amplify their voices. And through leveraging its network, INEE has really been a key partner for Porticus to ensure that every child has access to quality education that meets their needs. Then around thought leadership. I really appreciate INEE's thought leadership in reimagining education in emergencies and really welcome its efforts to fully embed localization and deepen its impact at a national and regional level, as we'll hear more about later. We really see very strong alignment and opportunities to build on these foundations in Porticus's focus countries, such as in Bangladesh. And we believe that this really positions INEE as a critical actor in advancing quality education in emergencies. And then around expertise and knowledge brokering, I personally really enjoy participating in INEE's member spaces, such as the PSS SEL working group. I know that Esther, the wonderful facilitator, is also on this call. Thank you, Esther. These member spaces, they have been great spaces for reflection and also for belonging. And I've learned so much from the diverse members in the group. I think the commitment to look beyond individual organizational mandates so that others don't have to reinvent the wheel has really been very inspiring. And I often point people to the great guidance and resources hosted by INEE, such as the PSS SEL Toolbox or the Measurement Library, as they're relevant for education in emergencies, but also beyond, in more mainstream education systems. And INEE also continues to be an important standard setter for the sector. The minimum standards, they remain a cornerstone document for the whole sector to rally around, as we have already heard, from some of the other speakers today. So I just want to end by saying that I really hope and trust that INEE will continue to play these important roles and will really remain the constructive disruptor, as Faiza called it. It is. We really need it now and maybe more than ever. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think wonderful notes to end this session on, and an emphasis of strengths that INEE has offered to our membership in terms of our convening power, our thought leadership, standard setting, and knowledge brokerage, but areas that we really want to continue to strengthen and continue to stand behind. So we want to hear briefly now from all of you. We have 111 attendees currently, and it's fantastic to have all of you with us. So we're going to share a link in the chat. I think probably many of us are familiar with this, but it's going to be a live word cloud. So we'd love to hear from you. What does INEE mean to you? Continuing the same question. So you can access the link in the chat. You can use this QR code that is on the slide, and we'll just take a couple minutes, probably honestly just a minute, for you to brainstorm a keyword, a thought in terms of what INEE means to you. And if you have any trouble accessing the link, please feel free to just note your word in the chat itself. That's perfectly fine as well. And Shreya, just as hopefully words are coming in, can we start to display the word cloud whenever you're ready? Wonderful. I see community coming through really strongly. Solidarity and learning are kind of the three highlighted, bolded words. I think words get larger if more people note them. But I also see best practice, partnership, engagement, spirit, learning space for peers, human rights, thought leader, shared voice. Let's see, just a couple more. INEE as a roadmap, a standard setter, a lighthouse. Let's see. Discourse, provocation, crecimiento. Wonderful. Collaboration I see in the chat, hope and life. Thank you so much, all of you. It's really just wonderful to have these reflections. And I think now we're really excited we've had some kind of backward-looking reflections, and we're excited to turn to a moment in our agenda where we will be speaking about our new direction and our new operating model. So with that, I will hand over to Faiza for our next panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. As we turn to presenting INEE's new operating model, I think first, before we get into what is changing within INEE, it's important to ground ourselves in why this change is happening. And much of this shift has been shaped by the conversations we've had through the What's Next for EIE, and also by the recommendations of the Centering Equity Reference Group. And so with that context in mind, let me hand over to Aishwarya to take us through some of the background context to this change. Aishwarya, over to you.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to walk you through some of the key insights across INE's efforts to deeply listen to our community. And as shared in the word cloud, community is at the center of what we do at INE, and we turn to them to ask what works in the sector today and what needs to change. To do this, INE set up the Centering Equity Reference Group, also called SURGE. It was formed by diverse INE members who very critically examined how the organization works to honestly confront power imbalances head on. They developed a set of recommendations for the Secretariat to strengthen equity and representation in INE's work. We also had all of you participate in INE's global survey and consultation called Beyond Aid, What's Next for EIE. Every voice was so powerful and helped shape INE's direction today. And more about this in a bit. The INE Secretariat too recently had their retreat and reflected on how our work can be locally grounded and globally connected. We're going to show you a glimpse from the thousands of voices that participated. Take a minute to read through them and feel free to share your reactions in the chat. Okay. So let's dive deeper into where these voices are coming from. Our What's Next for EIE global consultation was a very important exercise, not just for INE, but for the sector at large. We shouldn't have to wait for a conference or a global pledge to share how people felt amidst these funding cuts, or to learn how the community is innovating and adapting in small and big ways. Over 1,000 voices across 66 countries through surveys and meetups in 5 languages participated. So let's have a look at what they had to say. The impact of the funding cuts has threatened the prioritization of EIE. It has been severely uneven, and yet everyone is feeling the squeeze one way or the other. Participants also shared how EIE is losing focus and is being folded into other portfolios to streamline costs. And more importantly, the impact is beyond the whole monetary aspect of things, right? It is about it's shaping how programs are being prioritized and how they're being delivered to. Learners and teachers are severely affected. If you can go to the next slide, share. We see limited access to life-saving psychosocial support, increased dropouts, reduced feeding programs, unpaid wages for teachers, among many other crucial impacts. And we also see how learners and teachers on the front line are hit the hardest. And this is magnified for already marginalized communities. But what these voices also powerfully showed is that while the system is tired, people are not. I was given a comment recently that people are also tired, and that's absolutely true. But I think what the consultation showed was how people are working against all odds and despite the tiresome effort they're putting into it. So I would like to spotlight a quote from a teacher in Lebanon who participated in the survey. Please take 30 seconds to read it. She says, I try to look at this as an opportunity to engage. No books, we create our own. We build our own labs. We made board games out of drink bottles to learn fractions. We planted seeds. We rise to meet children's hope. Creativity is not a teaching tool. It's how we survive. This is one of the many, many ways people on the ground are continuing to support and operate with resilience and courage while the global architecture of EIE still tries to catch up. How are they doing this? Communities are diversifying funding. We see how they're turning to faith-based support, private sector, diaspora funding, and income-generating activities to keep schools running. They are advocating for systemic change, pushing governments to increase EIE budgets. A notable example was how in the DRC, one NGO reported advocating for taxes on communications and raw material exports to sustain EIE. They are strengthening collaboration across stakeholders, across all levels. They're leveraging community-based support. Multiple participants highlighted how refugee volunteers have been taking on teaching, mentoring, and managing extracurricular activities amidst teacher shortages worldwide. We see how church volunteers are gathering supplies to keep schools open. And finally, they're advancing mind-blowing local innovations. All this sounds great, but a big warning sign is that we cannot mistake local ingenuity for infinite capacity. Global responsibility cannot fall on the backs of local actors alone. And their asks echo this. So, what are they calling for? Members have been consistently saying there are too many actors doing the same thing, too many intermediaries absorbing costs, and too few systems tracking where the money goes. They're asking for the role of UN agencies and INGOs to be reformed from implementers to enablers. They're asking to shift power and resources closer to the ground and also warn that in the name of localization, we cannot absolve ourselves of the responsibility to support local actors. Localization, in a sense, cannot be just delegated without genuine power sharing. Members also repeatedly stated that community action cannot replace state obligation and that we need to move to investing in systems instead of reactive and episodic projects. They're asking that funding meet real needs and not donor priorities. What's interesting across the surveys is that almost everyone said that it is everyone's responsibility to address inequities in EIE. Fiscal innovation must go hand in hand with trust building and collective ownership. No ministry, no NGO, no volunteer can do this alone. An unequivocal ask was for knowledge to not just be top down. Local wisdom matters and must be counted. It must shape global standards. They've asked to start highlighting local solutions that can be replicated in other contexts that are similar. More importantly, knowledge should mean more than long policy briefs and academic papers. They're asking to make it accessible to a teacher in a classroom in the midst of a crisis. Finally, another ask is to make accountability meaningful and not extractive. Accountability today cannot just mean compliance and extractive reporting. Local actors cannot be the only ones answerable to funders and governments. They should too be answerable to students and teachers. Students and teachers alike expressed how education in crisis cannot be designed from a distance. They asked to be considered in decision making for solutions that impact them. They also shared how all the trainings and capacity building is meaningless if teachers remain underpaid, unprotected, and unseen. This was a lot. Let's pause for a minute and reel it all in. Again, feel free to type in your reactions in the chat. So the asks are immense, and we simply need to rise up to it so that 1 year later or 2 years later, the same demands are not shared over and over again as it has honestly been the case for several years now. It is time for radical shifts. And INE also wants to build from a position of our strengths too. We've already heard about some of these strengths in the opening panel, and the broader community validates that. They value INE's global legitimacy, resources, and tools. INE is trusted to be a strong advocate for EIE and in bringing together diverse stakeholders across the sector because it's a neutral party. People also describe renewed energy, clarity, and focus in the organization and considered smaller size a positive thing. However, they do not want INE to just be a mirror to the sector. As Dr. Faiza Hassan mentioned in her opening remarks, they want INE to be bolder, more assertive, and more rooted in shaping the sector. Over to you, Faiza, to share how we'd be doing that in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya. Okay, so how do we want to do this in practice? If you move to the next slide, please. What we want to do is we have different layers. At the individual level, our members remain at the heart of everything we do. That is people, that is everyone that's on this call here, people working collectively to solve problems, to rebuild and to recover. At the country level, our country focal point initiative will evolve into a much stronger, more supported structure. And I said earlier, this is evolving to become much more embedded within ministries of education, teaching unions, civil society networks, and other existing national platforms. And by doing this, it allows us to draw on the depth of the network and to really anchor ourselves at the country level. At the regional level, we are transitioning our language communities and will anchor them within existing regional networks. This shift will introduce regional leads within our structure. And most importantly for INEE, it means that language becomes a tool rather than an organizing principle, which then means we can go beyond our current four main languages to much more. At the global level, we will remain the sector's principal convener, and we will become much more focused on maintaining a strong and coherent voice for education. The Secretariat team will continue to connect, convene, and facilitate across the sector. If you go to the next slide, please. And so in terms of what this practically means in terms of INEE's main offerings, one of the biggest shifts that we see will be in how we do technical support. We want to shift from our current model where technical support largely sits within the Secretariat to a model that draws on the full depth and expertise across our membership. And as part of this shift, we're establishing mechanisms that tap into existing expertise at all levels in the network, enabling collective problem solving and much more demand-driven support. This, of course, builds on our role as an EIE standard setter and knowledge broker, and it builds on the extensive resource base that has been developed over the last 25 years. If you move to the next slide, please. A key exciting addition is actually the Education in Emergencies Professional Development Program, which over the last 10 years has strengthened technical skills of frontline practitioners, offering anything from foundational courses to advanced university accredited trainings. And so this is the kind of sector-wide, locally led capacity strengthening that our new operating model will deepen. Next slide, please. Another core shift that we're making is in how we engage with our membership. Our 25,000 members are an extraordinary asset, but we know that we can engage them much more intentionally and more deeply. And so we will work to deepen and diversify our membership base. We will introduce a model that includes both individual as well as organizational members, and we will define clear membership categories across the network. An important point to note here is that in line with the recommendations from the Centering Equity Reference Group, we will also evolve our governance model to better reflect the diversity of our membership. This means that we will have representation across regions, constituencies, and lived experience. And at the heart of this shift in our governance model is decentralizing decision-making so that those with lived experience of crisis hold meaningful influence and authority across the network. Next slide, please. And in terms of knowledge management, members consistently note that this is one of INEE's strongest value adds. But at the same time, we also recognize the limitations of our current knowledge management system, especially around accessibility, diversity, and a user-centered experience. And so in our next phase, we're focusing on strengthening our role as a knowledge curator and broker, and we're focusing on developing a more accessible, more diverse, and user-centered knowledge hub. Next slide, please. Apologies, I'm rushing through this as I keep my eye on the time. In terms of our advocacy work will continue to be grounded both in data and the lived experience of our membership. And we will not only be a strong voice for EIE, but for the wider education sector, because as a whole, this is very much part and parcel of the broader education sector. We're clear that our advocacy work will reinforce and work with other global actors like the Global Campaign for Education, the Global Education Cluster, Education Cannot Wait, the Global Geneva EIE Hub. There's many other partners with which we will work to reinforce our advocacy efforts. Next slide, please. And this is the final slide, and that is to say, change takes time. And this transition will be anchored in a continuous dialogue with you, our members, and our partners. We will use the entirety of 2026 as a transition year to phase in this model. We will listen, we will adapt, we will refine as we go, we will change what needs to change as we go. By early 2027, we hope to have fully implemented this new operating model, embedding it across the entire network. We're excited to go on this journey, and we look forward to having your feedback guiding us through this process. With that, I will stop there, and Aishwarya, back to you for the next panel.
Thank you so much, Faiza. And I'm sure this is a lot of information for a lot of you, but as Faiza said, I think as we start actioning some of these insights, hopefully we'll get to hear a lot more from each one of you. And we're very excited to see how INEE is listening differently, working differently, and redefining its identity. Before we move on to the panel, I'd love for you to pause and share your reactions on what part of INEE's shift resonates most with you and why. Meanwhile, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our panelists for this session. We have with us Dr. Salome Maina, who's in charge of education and emergencies at the State Department of Basic Education in Kenya. She has been a bold and leading voice in strengthening education systems in crisis-affected settings, and has also been at the forefront of Kenya's efforts to expand access, equity, and embed resilience in its national education policy. We also have with us Tyler Arnott, who is the Director of Global Programs at Street Child and also the INGO representative at Education Cannot Wait ECW Executive Committee. Tyler brings over a decade of strong experience working directly in education programming across several EIE contexts, and also has been leading humanitarian efforts at the global level through INGO and UN forums. We have our third panelist, who's Aska Miklar, who's an SDG4 Youth and Student Network member and who has been tirelessly advocating for young people to actively shape relevant and effective policies. And finally, we have Ruth Custode Mejia, who's a renowned EIE specialist and one of the creators and co-leaders of the Regional Education and Risk Management Group, driving policies and programs that still remain benchmarks in the region. So you've just heard INEE outline its next chapter. And from where you sit, dear panelists, be it government, INGO, youth, or regional coordination, what part of INEE's vision feels most urgent and what feels hardest to realize in practice right now?
May I start?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So let me start saying that I feel really honored to have been part of the INEE history for almost 20 years now and have contributed to its outreach and work in the Americas and the Caribbean. Regarding to your question, in my opinion, the most urgent part of INEE vision is bringing power and decision maker closer to communities and schools where crises unfold. In the Latin America and the Caribbean, we see again and again that teachers, local authorities, and communities are the first responders in education. If we want education to be truly safe, relevant, and resilient, their voices must guide both the design and the implementation of the responses. Decentralization is not just a principle, it's necessary if we want that education services remain valid and essential in humanitarian action. But what feels the hardest in practice is changing the habits and structures and invest in creating spaces to empower education communities, to identify resources, to develop technical capacities, and to create accountable tools and recognize local actors. The challenges, as we can see, is not only technical, but we need to make sure to power truly shifts where crises unfold, so that the education emergency is not only delivered to the communities, but built with them. The future in the education emergency depends on trust in the communities and in their leadership. It will mean that the lessons from a rural classroom in Honduras or a migrant shelter in Mexico, for example, can shape global standards just as much as the global guidance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. Would the other panelists like to share their thoughts on what resonated most with them in terms of INEE's new direction?
Yeah, I can go next.
Please, Aska,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yes, I think from the youth perspective, the most urgent part that resonated with me is the shifting of the power to the crisis-affected learners. And I think this is one of the most urgent part because if you localize this action, I feel that they bring the most learned wisdom, and then they bring the most experience as well. But then this is also the most urgent part as well as the most hardest part to initiate and to bring into action, because as we are talking about crisis affected learners, they have certain issues that they face, as we all know, like barriers to safety, internet issues, and like resources that make the engagement quite seamless. So I think this is both very urgent, but also to streamline this, it can also be quite tricky. Yeah, I think these are my
Absolutely.
thoughts.
Thank you, Aska. And I think from what both you and Ruth said, it brings us directly to the heart of participation. So, Aska, actually, I wanted to ask you the next question, because you consistently remind us that, systems only shift if young people are taken seriously. So, one of the quotes that came up in the presentation and the consultation was from a student that said, "Don't make decisions in a boardroom with AC, sit in a real classroom and listen." How do you think we can move to genuine shared decision making with learners beyond just ticking a checkbox, especially in crisis contexts? What would that kind of look like in practice?
Yeah. So, coming from the student's perspective again, as youth, the student's comment and her ask is basically a reminder that in education in emergencies, the systems are very strong for listening, right? But when it comes to the sharing of power, there are quite few issues, right? And consultations, as mentioned, are not an issue at all. But uh, and when we're talking about consultations are really strong when it comes to that. But then what happens after consultations is again quite tricky, as I mentioned. So if learners, crisis affected learners, speak, and if they voice out their opinions, and the decisions still stay with the adults in distant AC rooms, then nothing changes, right? And then that's where we need to come forward. And if we need to move from listening to shared decision making, we need a real structural shift. And then the first thing that I'd like to say is coming again, what the student needs is crisis affected learners, they must be part of actual decision making bodies. And then by decision making bodies, I mean they need to be part of youth councils, advisory groups, or review panels. And they need to actually sit alongside the decision makers and then the adults when priorities are being set for themselves. And then when programs are designed, and even when budgets are being shaped, right? And then these roles shouldn't just be symbolic roles, but then they should also be roles with influence. So then decisions can be influenced by the lived experience learners' views and opinions. And then second thing which I'd like to highlight is that constant accountable feedback loops should be implemented. And then what I mean by this again is if a certain learner, as you've shown, asks for an input, they should see what has been changed because of what they said, right? Because they would obviously want to see the change. And if certainly nothing has been changed because of what they have said, they obviously deserve an explanation for that certain reason, because without transparency, consultation again becomes a extractive method. And then the third and final practice that I'd like to say is um, the the way participation has been designed for crisis learners to partake is that it needs to fit their crisis realities, so they can continue engaging in their certain aspects. So flexible platforms such as WhatsApp groups, safe community spaces, and simple low tech tools should also be adopted and can be adapted as well, so that young people in any situation that they are in, be it displacement or even conflict, they can still continue to co-create solutions even when the access is limited, so that this certain crisis situation that they are in doesn't just take off their agency, it just changes how they engage with it.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
so
thank you, for,
yeah,
sorry, Aska,
I
go
think
on.
I meant about, yeah, yeah. So in simple terms, if I had to state in one line, if shared decision making looks like in EIE and in classrooms, I would say that it would be the learners who choose what matters to them, because it would be shaped by their lived wisdom and not assumptions made by the people at the on the AC rooms, I would say, like in AC rooms. Yeah. So it would most
Absolutely.
probably look like humility, and in humility, and then it would be shaped by the people who have lived it. Yeah. And in one line again, I'd like to say that and as people, you would collectively say that uh, to that specific student, your voice builds this
Yeah.
system, tell us where to go next. Yeah, I
Thank you
think I
so
would.
much, Aska. And, we really appreciate the concrete, actionable strategies that you just pointed out. I think somebody in the chat also said that, it's time for action. So, and that point on shared decision making naturally links to the role of those who carry the greatest responsibility towards their citizens, which is our governments, right? And
Yeah,
across consultations, there's been a strong sentiment that governments need to step up, not only in terms of funding EIE, but also in supporting and enabling local actors. So, Dr. Maina, the next question is for you in that vein. From your perspective, and being part of the government agency, what does government leadership really look like in education and emergencies? And what are the biggest hurdles to making that a reality? I think what would be more keen on understanding is, who in that ecosystem needs to step aside to kind of enable or create space for true government leadership in EIE.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be part of this conversation. Kindly allow me to first begin by saying that as a ministry, we deeply value INEE's contribution in shaping the global standards and tools that have guided countries like Kenya in strengthening their national systems for education in emergencies. We appreciate our work so far with INEE as partners in strengthening psychosocial support and socio-emotional learning at the county level, the review process of the disaster risk reduction policy, and as well as active member of the Kenya EIE working group that I chair. For us, this conversation about government's leadership in education in emergency is both timely and essential. The crisis we face today, from climate-induced disasters to displacement and conflict, have made it clear that governments can no longer rely solely on external aid to ensure continuity of learning during crisis. Hence, leadership in education in emergency must be institutionalized, locally owned, and sustained. In our view, the government leadership in education in emergency means three key things. That is ownership, system integration, and sustainability. On ownership, governments must lead not just in response, but in preparedness and coordination. In Kenya, we have institutionalized EIE within our national education strategic plan, and with the objective of ensuring that education in emergency is not a parallel humanitarian agenda, but part of our national education system. Secondly, on integration, leadership means embedding EIE into the everyday work of education management, from planning, budgeting, and teacher training to data systems. For example, our education management information system, which is currently being revamped to CHEMIS, now captures data on schools affected by drought or floods, thus enabling us to respond faster and more effectively. Finally, on sustainability, the government must progressively fund and own IIE interventions. We must work with county governments, development partners, stakeholders to co-finance school infrastructure recovery, school meals program, teacher capacity building within the government frameworks. However, there are still hurdles that we are still experiencing, and key among them is actually on financing. As you are aware, humanitarian funding is unpredictable, while domestic budgets are already stretched. It is difficult to maintain readiness when emergencies are recurrent, especially due to the current climate-induced challenges that we are experiencing globally and here in our country. Secondly, we look at the challenge on capacity. At the national level, we have frameworks, but at subnational levels, in counties and schools, we need stronger technical skills and coordination structures. Thirdly, we have issues of policy practice disconnect, where policies exist, but operationalizing them, especially in the marginalized areas, requires sustained political will and collaboration. So leadership in education in emergency is it is not a one-time declaration, it is a daily act of stewardship to ensure learning never stops, no matter the crisis. Now, when we look at the kind of support that ministries would require from INEE, I think this network like INEE can play a catalytic role in three main ways: in capacity strengthening, evidence generation, and advocacy. On capacity strengthening, ministries need continued access to global knowledge, adaptable tools, and learning exchanges that build institutional capacities, not just individual skills. Therefore, I need technical resources such as PSS, SNL toolbox, and the INEE minimum standards have been very instrumental. But what really makes the difference is contextualization, ensuring that these tools are translated into actionable and local frameworks. On evidence generation, we need more contextual evidence on what works in government-led EIE. Networks can help generate and synthesize this knowledge, for example, on how to integrate psychosocial support, social-emotional learning, and school safety into national teacher development programs. Thirdly, on advocacy and convening power, INEE is uniquely positioned to bring together ministries, development partners, stakeholders, and civil societies. This convening role helps align the global commitment with national priorities, ensuring that EIE is not an afterthought, but a core part of education planning and financing discussion. In other words, what government need most from INEE is a strategic partnership, one that empowers local systems, amplifies evidence from the ground, and helps us build resilience from within. As Kenya, we have seen firsthand that when networks, development partners, stakeholders, and governments work together in a spirit of mutual accountability, we can move from reactive response to proactive system resilience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Maina. And I think we really appreciate how you clearly articulated what support from INE for ministries can look like. And also really want to underline what you said about how EIE cannot be a reactive afterthought and how it needs to be embedded and pre-planned for in national systems. So we spoke about also the government's role, which is rooted in ownership, in coordination, technical capacities, and an important point that you highlighted was stronger financing. And that brings us to INGOs, who often have the power to catalyze these efforts, but also sit in the middle of complex expectations. Tyler, we turn to you. So the What's Next consultations challenged INGOs very blatantly and openly to redefine their role, to become enablers instead of implementers, and to really share power, not just to delegate delivery. And I think what was clear across these consultations is that it is not a global versus local tug of war. It is just a call for shared responsibility. But we've heard this being said so many times over and over again across different conferences and briefs. What do you think is getting in the way of making this a reality? What are some practical ways in which INGOs can actually redistribute power, risk, and accountability in the way they partner with local organizations today? Tyler, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ashwarya. And first of all, just huge congratulations to all of you, INEE. Having been a member now for 15 plus years, it's quite an honor to be with you all today. And frankly, a little intimidating to be on a panel with such incredible colleagues and in front of so many people I've counted as mentors over the years. And so, of course, what did resonate with me from the survey was this direct call to INGOs to reimagine our roles. And I think that's something we've been hearing in a lot of different spaces. So to reflect on why that has been so difficult in the past, I want to reflect a little bit on my own experience. So Probably like many of you, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on why I entered this field in the first place. This year has challenged us to think differently. It certainly was not to sit in committees and manage compliance frameworks. I came into this work because I care deeply about education and because I've always believed that every child should have access to it. I was pulled in by young children on an airstrip in South Sudan who asked for nothing more than a classroom, by entrepreneurial and uncompromising local organizations in Somalia, and by communities and teachers in Liberia who demanded that we reopen their schools after Ebola. I'm not in this line of work because of the systems that we now have to spend so much time navigating. And I believe it's this pull towards solidarity that Amrita highlighted where we started that led so many of us to the sector. And it's not a pull toward power. But solidarity is hard. It asks us in international organizations right now to confront our own power and the incentives of the systems that we work in. And incentives that, frankly, many of us have built our careers around and our organizations around. So it's these incentives and their responding systems that's getting in the way of honest power sharing and true partnership. And the truth is, most INGOs are not constructed today to share powers, but to manage it. And the donor-led system rewards us for doing exactly that. We're rewarded for control, for strong systems, strong oversight, and strong management. We're rewarded for visibility, for being the ones who can convene and report and present. We're rewarded for growth, for having more grants and more geographies, bigger portfolios. And we're rewarded for being the safe pair of hands. I think even well-meaning INGOs and those of us in them end up designing partnerships around compliance and risk transfer rather than genuine co-leadership. And once we see these incentives clearly, it becomes obvious why solidarity is hard. It's not that INGOs are unwilling. It's that our core systems, from finance to meal to HR and safeguarding, were built for control. They're built to approve, to sign off, and to manage risk. And real solidarity now requires us in INGOs to push against the very behaviors that the system rewards us with, that we associate with institutional survival in a lot of cases. And we as INGOs have to re-examine our comparative value through this lens of solidarity, not just what we do well, but what we're uniquely positioned to share, to give up, or to protect so that local actors can lead. So that's why it's hard. But you also ask practical ways INGOs can begin to redistribute power or act in true solidarity. So first, we have to be clear about our identity. INGOs are civil society, or we at least were born of civil society. And many of us stay in this work because we believe deeply in the value of organized civic action. When we recognize this, it becomes easier to reimagine our role, not acting for local actors, but acting with them and committing to practical reforms of redistribution and system change. And these approaches will depend on each organization's comparative value, but a few that matter broadly for INGOs, I believe, are the protection of civic space, especially today, using our comparative safety, our international visibility, our diplomatic channels to defend critical operating space for our partners, providing on-demand comparative technical expertise. We as INGOs sit across multiple contexts, and this does bring a useful perspective when it's responding to locally defined priorities and not institutional mandates. And we should be entering into long-term and predictable partnerships, aiming for stability through longer-term commitments, a focus on organizational strengthening, and accompaniment that goes beyond the project cycle. And we should be using unrestricted resources, to be very specific, to shift systems and not dominate them. Even in difficult times, we have access to the resources needed to redesign funding models, compliance systems, and partnership structures so that local actors can lead. And we need to deploy our convening and diplomatic power strategically, whether with GPE, ECW, at the General Assembly, or in donor capitals. INGOs can use their access to insist on the inclusion of national civil society, to push back against donor constraints that undermine local leadership, to advocate for accountability frameworks that recognize local legitimacy, and that challenge political decisions that restrict CSO's operating space. And especially today, as we're being asked about our role in a new ecosystem, we need to recognize that our legitimacy will come from our ability to make room, not to take that room. If INGOs want to remain relevant, our political function must evolve Protecting civic space, redistributing influence, and ensuring local civil society is never left alone where it's threatened. To conclude, as INGOs, we are civil society, and solidarity with communities and local actors must define how we show up, what power we hold, and what power we're willing to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler, and thank you for the honest reflection. I think when INGO representatives do that and boldly acknowledge the system's limitations, but also think about how they can act and be different, we are already one step closer to the kind of sector that the community is talking about. So I laud your frankness in this discussion. And if shifting power is, one side of the coin, shifting how knowledge moves is the other. So Ruth, this time it's your turn. You have seen firsthand how learning flows or doesn't across a region, and your experience here is important. So INE's new direction calls for knowledge that flows in all directions. And having led a regional network, what mechanisms or habits need to change for that to really happen, for knowledge to flow in all directions? I am recognizing that we are a bit over time. So if we could keep the responses a little more concise, that would be amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, when we talk about knowledge that travels in all directions, I think the knowledge that comes from classrooms, schools, and communities. For too long, we know that the knowledge has moved only in one direction, from the global guidance to the local practices. Ministries or agencies sharing only among themselves. But the truth is that the most powerful lessons begin right when the children are learning in the daily world of teachers and community, in schools. If we want a new vision to become reality, first, we must recognize local knowledge as global knowledge. Teachers know how to keep learning alive in the middle of the crisis, how to adapt lessons when resources are few, and how to support children who are displaced or facing violence. Those experiences should not remain invisible. They must be documented, shared, and celebrated so that they can inspire others across the region and even globally. Second, we need to break the silos. In Green Lake, for instance, one of the most powerful lessons was that when ministers of education, NGOs, UN agencies, and education communities working side by side, knowledge flowed in multiple directions. Co-leadership meant knowledge was not owned by one actor. It was shared, challenged, and adapted collectively. The habit of collaboration is what makes knowledge truly travel. Third, must translate ideas into context. A tool or policy for one country may not fit another exactly, but the principles can travel if they are acted with respect to the locally context. And finally, we need to value reciprocity. Every classroom, every community has something to teach. During the COVID-19 pandemic, ministers of education and teachers in our region developed creative ways to reach children remotely and safely reopen schools. Those lessons enrich global guidance. That is what means that knowledge moves in all directions, not assuming that expertise flows from the center, but recognizing the resilience and creativity everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I think these are very valuable insights when we think about knowledge and evidence and expertise, whose counts, who recognizes this as knowledge and evidence. So thank you so much to all the panelists, and across the discussions, we talked about systems a lot. And the irony here is that we are the system. And I think today's reflections remind us that the future of education and emergencies is not something to again codify. Rather, it's something that we build together. And we as INEE look forward to building this next chapter with you. Thank you, everybody. Over to you, Sonia.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya, and to all of the fantastic panelists. Thank you to all of you for still being here with us. Now about 14 minutes over. We're really thrilled that you're continuing in this journey with us, and we will let you go very soon. So just a couple points. We will make this the PowerPoint, the presentation, as well as the recording of this event available on the INE website. Please feel free to follow up with any additional questions. As we've all noted, this is an ongoing and a continuing journey, so we want to continue hearing from you. And with that, we will close. I will hand over to Dr. Julia Seibert, who is a policy advisor at GIZ and INEE Steering Group co-chair. Julia, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you see me? Yes.
Yes, but you are, for some reason, blurry, at least on my end. It looks like your Zoom is blurring both you and the background, unfortunately. There we go. Beautiful.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
So you see my kitchen, but this is not a problem. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as we bring this event to a close, I'm filled with gratitude and inspiration. Today, we celebrated 25 years of INE's engagement in education and emergencies. And as we all have seen, INE has significantly shaped and driven the sector's achievements and developments. We heard this message from diverse voices, each offering unique perspectives and valuable insights. Thank you to Johanna, to Wahid, Professor Kam America, Dr. Chima, and Diorque. Listening to you made very visible how INE has shaped your work and engagement. Looking ahead, the path will require continued collaboration, innovation, and dedication. Askar Mitka, Ruth Custode, Dr. Salome Maina, and Tyler Arndt, you all have shared your reflection with us, and the reflection you shared with us reminded us that while the obstacles are significant, so are the opportunities to make meaningful changes. We must remain committed to supporting local actors, fostering partnership, and advocating for sustained investment in education and emergencies. As a co-chair of INE Steering Group, I want to express my deepest gratitude to all our speakers and participants. Your contribution and dedication are the foundation of INE, and through our collective efforts, we will continue to build a more equitable future for all learners. In recent months, INE has been actively involved in discussions about transforming the IAE sector and has now embarked on its own journey to be part of a reform project that is emerging across the sector. It was only 2 weeks ago when the members of the INE Steering Group supported Faiza and her team, the INE Secretariat, in embarking on a shift that leads INE in this new direction. INE will remain its role as a global convener, standard setter, and knowledge broker for EIE, but will also significantly enhance its efforts to support the localization of the EIE sector and serve as a catalyst for change. We've heard this in detail from Faiza and from some other participants, and I want also to share with you that on our beloved website of INE, you will find now also a brief on this shift of INE. So if you want to go in more detail, please feel free to consult the website. INE's strategic realignment will be guided by continuous dialogue with its members and partners. In other words, INE will listen, adapt, and refine as they move forward. Together, we can inspire collective action to shape the next 25 years of INE. Thank you once again for your participation and engagement today and in the future. Over to Sonia.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful to have you with us, and we hope this is a continuing conversation. And with that, we will close. I hope everyone has a nice rest of your day, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are.